This is Frank Islam, Chairman and CEO of FY Investment Group, and your host of DC Night Show, where we interview leading voices from business, from politics, that impact you, the viewer. Today, we are fortunate to have a guest who's distinguished, who works at the State Department, and who's also the United States envoy to the Office of Islamic Country. He inspires all of us to do well, but he also inspires all of us to serve our country and to serve our community. And he has done a great job. He's a passionate and committed, and we want to make sure that he continue to do what he's doing so well. Thanks very much, Arsalan, for coming here. Tell us, the audience, a little bit about yourself. You have done so well at the State Department representing our community. We take a lot of pride what you have accomplished. So tell the audience a little bit about not your accomplishment, who you are, and a little bit of your background, and then we get to the questions and answer session.
Well, thank you so much, Frank, and thanks for having me on your show. I grew up and was born and raised in New Orleans, Louisiana.
My gosh, you're a Southern boy.
That's right, I'm a Southern boy, and my parents are originally from Pakistan, but they settled. First they came to New York, and then they came to Louisiana, and I was born and raised there. I had an interesting multicultural experience in New Orleans. I went to a high school, a Jesuit high school. I went to a Jesuit college at Georgetown in Washington, D.C. And throughout my experience, my parents are both doctors. So growing up, I had an interest in medicine, but by the time I got to high school, when I got very involved in policy debate in high school, my interest in policy issues and politics really got elevated. And so after that experience, when I got to college, I was really interested in international politics. So that's what I studied.
And you went to George Washington?
I went to Georgetown.
Georgetown school.
So I went
to law school?
I went to Georgetown, the School of Foreign Service.
Yes,
for college. For law school, I went to Harvard for law school.
Oh, very good.
And in between that, I did a master's degree in international peace studies on a George Mitchell scholarship in Ireland, in Dublin. So throughout my education, I focused...
You have a great background.
Yeah, thank you.
Wonderful background. And I hope the people who are listening in the audience, and a lot of younger people listening all over the world, should be inspired by who you are and your story. Born in a Muslim family and a Muslim immigrant, going to this school, learning about multicultural faith, those are the values that binds us together as an American, being a law school, being a passionate committed to the international politics, and now you're representing us in a great capacity. So the office that you work for, Secretary Kerry, is called the Office of Religion and Global Affairs. Tell us a little bit about its missions and goals and objectives, and what exactly this is all about. And is this the new office that has been created during the time of Secretary Clinton?
That's right. So about 3 years ago, under Secretary Kerry, the Office of Religion and Global Affairs was created. And the main impetus behind the office was to ensure that the department and the secretary himself are receiving the best information, analysis, and advice on issues that involve religion in global affairs. So part of what the office is focused on doing is advising the Secretary of State on issues where religion is playing a factor in global politics, or on issues where religion or religious communities and leaders can and should be playing a greater role.
Which is a very rare for American politics to have such a crucial role playing in politics, and also making sure that our foreign policy is designed to reflect that views.
In fact, I mean, you're touching on part of the issue that led to the office's creation, which is, you're alluding to the fact that in America we have a separation of church and state.
It sure is.
And so religion is always, essentially kept apart from the politics. And one way that has actually hampered the work of our foreign diplomats is that sometimes, because of that legal restriction we have, they don't necessarily understand the extent to which they can or should be meeting with, engaging with, listening to, hearing from religious leaders in countries around the world. And this becomes a challenge because, as you know, even in America, religion plays such an important role in people's day-to-day lives. And when you talk about civil society, meaning the non-governmental organizations that make up an important part of countries, religious communities, churches, mosques, synagogues, these organizations and leaders play such an important role from everything from charity to
from all walks of life,
all
American.
walks of life, absolutely, on issues of health,
Yes.
on issues of just community relations and economic development. So the office is designed to not only advise the secretary, but also train and advise our diplomats and our embassies on the ways in which they can and should be engaging with religious leaders and communities, and how that knowledge
So
and
that includes the
understanding-
ambassadors also?
Yes, it includes the ambassadors also. But we're also starting from the bottom. We have what's called the Foreign Service Institute, FSI, which trains our diplomats, people from the very first year when they're coming into the department, to learn about various issues and skills that they need to have as diplomats. So we are ensuring that these types of training programs include an adequate and accurate assessment of the role that religion can play in global affairs. And we're also basically meant to be a sort of a front door to religious communities and actors who want to better engage with the State Department. So if
what are the issues and challenges that we face in order for you and your staff to integrate the community and the religious affairs into the foreign policy? That's a very new concept for the diplomat.
Yeah, it is. And part of the challenge is to overcome the initial, not really skepticism, but the initial sort of reaction of, well, that's religion, that's not politics.
Right.
So once you overcome that, there's also a right way of doing it. We want to make sure that as government officials, we are not saying what is and isn't the right interpretation of religion. We want to make sure that as government officials, we are not picking and choosing who we like best or whose interpretation we like best. And we also want to make sure that we're not instrumentalizing religious leaders and communities, meaning that we're not talking to them solely because we think that if they say the right thing during a khutbah, that's somehow going to lead to the right response. No, we want to have relationships with them the same way we have relationships with political opposition groups or other activist groups who are important actors within different countries and societies, because we can hear from them and learn from them what are the trends in society. And we can also explain to them what is American policy, why we have certain policies, so that we can help dispel conspiracy theories or other rumors or misperceptions that may be out there. So for all of these reasons, to have a better assessment of the real dynamics on the ground, to ensure that our policy is responding to the realities that are there, and that we're hearing from a diversity of opinions. These are all reasons why we want to have an office like the Office of Religion and Global Affairs.
So you are the acting envoy for the OIC, which is the Organization of Islamic Country, which is very, very important, and we're proud of your appointment to this position. What exactly is the missions and goals and objectives of this office is, and what have you been able to accomplish during your tenure in terms of reaching out to Islamic countries, and also the perception of United States? Now, sometimes United States represents not a gentle, a kinder face of America, but a violent face of America, and the perception is there, obviously. So there are some barriers to this. So how do you go about doing all these things? And what have you been? How have you been successful? What have been the success story for you?
So. As you know, as you mentioned, the OIC is the Organization of Islamic Cooperation. It's a international organization made up of 57 member countries.
And all the members of the country are Muslims.
Most of them are Muslim majority. There are
so India is not part of the OIC?
India is not part of the OIC.
But Pakistan is.
Pakistan is.
But remember, India is the second largest Muslim country in the world.
Yes.
Even it's a more population than Pakistan has. It has.
That's the latest statistics I think is accurate. So not every member is Muslim majority. There actually are some countries like Guyana and Suriname, for example.
So there are majority Muslim countries.
Yeah, and so there pretty much all Muslim majority countries are OIC members. There are some that are not Muslim majority, but as you said, there are countries with significant Muslim populations that aren't necessarily members. And if you look at America, actually, we have anywhere from 3 to 6 million Muslims,
Yes.
our Muslim population is actually greater than some of the OIC member countries in terms of Muslim population.
You're right, because United Arab Emirates is a good example. Emirati is only 700,000,
Right.
while the diaspora community in that part of the world is 6 to 7 million. So you're
Right.
absolutely right.
So through this position, the United States is not a member or an observer, but we recognize the importance of this institution.
Okay.
And we want to deepen and expand our relationship with the OIC and its member countries. So this position was actually created at the end of the George W. Bush administration as part of the efforts by that administration.
It's reaching out to the Muslim community.
Exactly.
And Muslim countries.
And under President Obama, my predecessor Rashad Hussain, who you know was
Sure.
appointed to be the envoy, and he was put in place in 2010. But this administration has focused on deepening and expanding our relationship with the OIC, and in particular our partnerships in areas of mutual interest and mutual concern. And so that's been the focus of the work. And we've been able to expand what used to be sort of an outreach effort, which was just to engage and to talk about Islam in America and how we're not at war with Islam, to a very substantive
You say we're not at war with Islam. Very well
Right.
said.
Yes. To a very partnership-focused and substantive engagement-focused relationship.
Does that partnership goes beyond the word you just said, that we're not at war with Islam? There are, in some cases, the violence has been breeding in some parts of the world because of the poverty, the desperation, and also the despair.
Mm-hmm.
And those are the things that fuels the frustration, the desperation for the people to do things they shouldn't be doing. So I know the global entrepreneurship has played a very important role. So tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, absolutely. So like you mentioned, and like I was mentioning about the Religion and Global Affairs Office, too often when people think of religion and global affairs, they just think of it, oh, it's about terrorism.
Yeah.
You want to engage with religious leaders because you want them to condemn terrorism. Well, that's not the case at all. We recognize the role that the OIC, that religious leaders, that others play in a whole host of areas. And so that's why we engage with them on all those areas. You mentioned the Global Entrepreneurship Summit. That's one of the flagship initiatives
No
that
question.
President Obama has been focused on ever since the Cairo speech. And these are summits that have been held for the past several years in different capitals throughout the world, in different cities throughout the world, focusing on the role of promoting entrepreneurship and ensuring that young entrepreneurs are provided with mentorship opportunities, and also that governments are creating the right atmosphere, the domestic environment for entrepreneurship to
For them to flourish.
Exactly. We saw with the Arab Spring,
Mm-hmm.
countries like Tunisia, Egypt, all over, where the frustration of not even being able to sell fruit on the street without having to pay corrupt officials some sort of money under the table, just really deepens the frustrations, deepens the grievances that people have with their governments and with the systems that they're operating within. And so part of it is to focus on providing the opportunity for the individual entrepreneurs, linking them with successful investors, successful CEOs like yourself, who can really provide them with the mentorship opportunities. But the other is to also send a signal to governments that, look, if you want to create an atmosphere of innovation, if you want to have your country ready and prepared to have an economy that's for the 21st century,
That works for everyone.
That works
It's
for
fair,
everyone.
That fair to everyone. It's fair to everyone.
then you need to adjust your policies to cut red tape, to ensure that people have the freedom to, create create a company. There's some countries where the timeline from filing paperwork to create a company takes, several months, if not years. Whereas in the U.S., you can start a company
You can do online.
almost overnight online. And
Right.
so that's what you want to encourage countries to get to, because if you have a stifling environment, people are not going to be able to create companies, they're not going to be able to create jobs, and you're going to have really high rates of unemployment, which leads to more grievances, which creates the conditions in which people are susceptible to the allure of groups that might have certain extremist views about trying to topple governments or lead people down the wrong path.
So tell me a little bit about some of the success story of OIC and some of the success stories of the global entrepreneurship, which made a meaningful difference and had a positive impact and influence in making a difference in people's lives.
Yeah. So there are several partnerships that
And somebody is interested in it, how did they go about reaching out to this Global Entrepreneurship and Office of Islamic Country, called OIC, Organization of Islamic Country, I meant to say that.
Yes, so if anyone's interested in our work, they can reach out directly to us. I have a Twitter account. You can tweet me at Arsalan_Suleman.
Okay, Arsalan_Suleman. Very well.
Can connect you with people either in our office or other offices of the department that are working in this area. But in addition to the focus on entrepreneurship, which has been a real flagship success story, we also have other partnerships with the OIC that I'm very proud of. Some of the recent ones that I've been focusing on include working in the area of combating extremism. So one area that we have recently held a meeting of experts in July, and we're getting ready for a workshop in November, is on the issue of religious education and promoting peace. As you know, a lot of people, we hear these stories about these extremists who, before going to join these terrorist groups, they buy Islam for Dummies. And they have really no sense of the essential teachings of the religion, but they're being manipulated in certain ways. So this initiative is an initiative by the OIC and their affiliate ISESCO in collaboration with the Global Counterterrorism Forum to focus on ways that government can assess the way that religious education can play a stronger role in promoting peace, to ensure that that different forms of education that might be creating or enhancing the opportunities for people to join extremist groups, that can be corrected. And the other side of this, which is the fact that if you have people who are religiously educated, that can often actually be a barrier or a prevention method for people to go to extremist groups. And we see that in the United States as well, when you have really strong institutions and very active imams who are able to effectively teach the teachings of the religion. They can ensure that people who are a part of their mosque or Islamic center or community center aren't recruited by certain groups. So that's one partnership that I think is going to pay long-term dividends. Another is in the field of human rights. We've been working with the OIC for the past several years on...
Is the human right and civil right, both?
Yes. So in the U.S. we call it civil rights. Internationally, the things that we talk about as civil rights are essentially called human rights. And we've worked with the OIC on different ways of promoting human rights, including promoting religious pluralism and tolerance. But one of the partnerships that we're focusing recently on is on the issue of combating the practice of female genital mutilation and cutting, FGMC.
And especially in Africa.
That's especially an issue in Africa, but in fact it also pervades parts of South Asia. There's certain communities like the Dawoodi Bora community which has this practice. And also there was a recent report by Islamic Relief which documents, and the World Bank, which documents the practice in Indonesia even, where this is a practice that is pervasive there. I think the number is about 300 million women and girls around the world have been affected by this practice. This is a practice that the United States absolutely condemns, and
they should.
It's something that we consider to be a violation of the rights of these girls who are forced to undergo this practice. And the OIC's position is the same. They also condemn the practice. So we've been working with the OIC to partner with them to raise their voice and the voice of religious leaders in condemning this practice. Because unfortunately, in many places of the world, people try to have religious justifications for the practice. They'll claim that there's some sort of sunnah or some sort of teaching, whether it's in Islam or Christianity.
It looks like they're misguided.
That's what many religious leaders have argued, and that's the position that the OIC takes. And that position is essentially, the same position that we have, that this practice is something that should be ended. And so we've been working with them on raising awareness, encouraging religious leaders to speak out. At the United Nations earlier this year, we held a joint event with the OIC where we brought in religious leaders as well as activists who are working in the field on this issue to try to elevate their voices and provide them with a platform. And just 2 months after that event at the OIC's Heads of State Summit in Istanbul in April, the OIC as a whole, they essentially called on all of their member states to ban the practice. And because of that partnership, because of that call on all their member states to ban the practice, we're working even more closely with them to ensure that their voice is part of various regional programs that are focusing on this issue. And we're also working with them on elevating the voice of religious leaders in this important.
You talk a little bit about the religious extremism, and what about the madrasa? Madrasa has been the center in some cases of extremism. Madrasa needs to become a temple of tolerance. Madrasa has also where people learn the skills which they cannot apply to the 21st century workforce, so they cannot be part of the productive workforce. What is your thought on that? And that's as you know, the madrasa is in every, in India and Pakistan, the two countries that I know, they're everywhere. And in some cases, they teach the students which is not relevant what they need to do to become a part of the productive force, the workforce of that nation, of that country.
Yeah, no, that's a very good point. And in fact, that issue is part of what we're trying to raise with the education program that I was talking about. The idea, essentially, like you said, is to ensure that madrasas, or in many countries, like you mentioned, there are parallel education systems. You have madrasas that are operating, and you also have the government-run schools that are operating, in addition to private schools that might also be operating. And it's been a challenge for certain governments to have oversight over what is being taught in the madrasa system, for example, and whether that standard meets maybe certain minimum standards that they want to have as a country. So that's an important issue for any government to consider. And I think there are certain ways in which there are some good practices that other countries have adopted, countries like Morocco, Indonesia.
And what exactly have they adopted that could potentially be propagated in the South Asia, which is, there's a lot of madrasa in South Asia. They produce the children, they cannot be part of the workforce and go get a job.
Yeah. So I don't want to broadly generalize too much, because I do think that there are some madrasas, even in India and Pakistan, that have updated their curriculum.
Absolutely right. They have.
They science and technology and English.
Well, not just the science and technology, even the art, even the tools and the trade, whatever it takes for them to get a job and to become part of the workforce.
And I think that's really the message, is that
that's the message.
You want to ensure that your students are best prepared not only to have the religious education, which those schools highly value and want to focus on, but also have the skills to be employed in the economy, to have a bright future, to be able to translate their, let's say they're in an elementary or high school madrasa. You want to be able to ensure that whatever diploma you get from that can be recognized by the university system.
So you can go to university after that. Very well.
So these are all regulations that obviously the countries themselves control, but the schools themselves have to ensure that they're meeting the standards so that those diplomas can be recognized not only for the universities within that country, but also if the students want to travel abroad and want to study abroad.
They should be able to do so.
They should be able to do so. And so any educator who's concerned about their students' well-being, their education, and their ability to advance, they should be concerned about the standards that they have. And I think that's something which is really a win-win for the governments and for the
I totally agree with that, and I'm sure the audience will also agree with that. Have you been successful in promoting this message?
I think so. I mean, so as I mentioned, we have this collaborative initiative with the OIC and ISESCO, and in fact, ISESCO, which is the OIC's affiliated body, it's the Islamic Scientific Education and Cultural Organization. They have been trying to improve their own work on education with their member countries, with the OIC member countries. And so they've developed networks of universities throughout the OIC member countries, and they've also held meetings of education ministers in order to start having these conversations about improving the curriculum, improving the standards, and ensuring that students aren't being miseducated in certain ways. So I think we have, willing partners, we have able partners, and now the idea is to ensure that the proper resources are being applied. And I also want to highlight that we talked about entrepreneurship, which really highlights the role of people who create businesses and
who
people
create
are
jobs, who
working
builds prosperity.
There are also similar people who are philanthropists and work in the education
Yes.
sector. And so the work of those individuals is extremely important. And I want to really thank you because you're taking a big leadership role with the Aligarh University in providing a substantial sum of money to ensure that that institution continues to be an institution
Yes.
of excellence in
No
India.
question about that. So this is the. I mean, what you're doing is admirable, and we appreciate what you're doing, and what the organization is doing, and what Secretary Kerry and the Global Affairs is doing in terms of the office. What about the Muslims American in the United States? What exactly is the message from you, from your organization, or from this office? What they have to do in order for them to engage in their own, the country they were born, or and make their life better in this country, and embrace the values of America, yet preserve and protect and promote their own faith. I would say preserve and protect, not necessarily promote their faith.
Mm-hmm.
What advice do you have for them?
Well, my advice is to be engaged.
Engaged in what way they have to be engaged?
I think engaged in every way, right?
Okay.
I think if whatever profession you go into, whatever walk of life, whatever your passions are, it's always important to try to do your best and to try to reflect, put your best foot forward, right? To put the best face on anything. And I think that's the same thing is true for any area that you want to work in or you're passionate about. A lot of people in the Muslim American community, maybe about 1/3 of our community here in America is actually African American. So they have very deep roots within this country, and which is rooted in this country's history. So Muslim Americans, across the board, they don't have to do anything to prove their Americanness. They are an integral part of the country, and they contribute.
Just as the President said, you are
Exactly.
Muslim and American.
And they contribute in so many different ways that we can't even kind of recount. And they are engaging at multiple levels. But I do think that in this particular environment where there is such scrutiny being placed on the community because of certain politicians, it is important for the community to be talking about the important work that they're doing, to be engaging, to be meeting with their neighbors, to ensure that people have the right face of Islam. When people think about Muslims, they think about their neighbors, they think about people who are doing such amazing work. They think about the fact that 10% of all doctors in this country are Muslim Americans, right? So if you go to a hospital, chances are you're going to meet a Muslim American. So these are all important factors. And the other factor is just, if they have an interest in influencing government policy, then they should be meeting with their elected officials. They should be reaching out to people in government like myself if they want to voice their opinion on things. Because the more that we hear from Americans about their concerns, that helps to inform the policy. And the more that elected leaders in particular hear from their constituents, the more likely they are to accurately reflect the views of those constituents or the concerns and try to address them in certain ways.
My other question is extremism, especially what happened in California not too long ago. And what environment do we need to create, and does the office need to create for them to understand they have a stake in this country? If they work hard, aim high, they can pursue their dream. They're the harmonious fabric of this nations. They're well integrated into the America's economy, political systems, and so on and so forth. What advice do you have for the younger people who are listening to the audience, and you're a very successful person, and you have a sort of what I consider an obligation to tell the younger people their best days ahead of them. They're strong, they're vibrant, they're resilient, and all of the above things. What advice do you have for them, and what they need to do to make sure they are well integrated, they're part of America's harmonious fabric of this nation?
Yeah. Well, my advice is just, be who you are.
Be who you are.
Be who you are. You're an American. If you were born here, if you're a citizen of this country, be who you are. This country is a land of opportunity.
It is. And my story can only happen in America.
Exactly. And, it's interesting how we define America, what we say is America, sometimes doesn't match with the reality, right? You want to say America is the leader of various things, but if you look back at our history, there are times at which we have had very serious problems related to
we
race
had our darkest past.
Exactly. So
an ugly past.
We do, yes, and those are issues that still, I think, challenge us to this day.
Yes.
And so it's important for us to recognize that those challenges are there and they're still present, but to also remember that we make what America is. If we want to see America a dark place, a place where minorities are unwelcome, where we're caught up in some sort of Darwinian rat race where one group has to win over another, then for many people that might be what they feel. But I think the reality is, and this is something that the president has said over and over again, is that that is not what America is. America has always been a country of opportunity. We've been a country that has welcomed immigrants. We've been a country that has ensured that people have a even playing field to the greatest extent we can as possible for people to create their own businesses, to integrate their families, to build a better future for themselves and for their children. And I think that is the reality of the America that we live in, even though some people might try to paint a different picture. And I think it's important for us all to ensure that we're talking about that America and we're helping to make that America a reality.
America, as you all know, has been a shining city upon a hill. Even Ronald Reagan, who was a Republican, said that. Mm-hmm. Even in 1632 on a ship Arabella, John Winthrop said that America is a city on a hill. You must always consider all the eyes that are upon us. America has always been a beacon of hope, aspirations, and dream. This country, where the impossible has been made possible. It's a great country, and I want to tell the younger audience and everyone who's listening, we need to work together. We have a shared goals and shared responsibility and shared sacrifices, and promote the message of the peace and justice. And this is who we are as an American. And those are the values that bind us together. Thank you very much, Arsalan, for coming over here. And this is Frank Islam wishing you a great week, and thank you for watching.